Just give me a moment here, yes. Dr. Yusuf. Let's go to Professor Chidi Odinkalu. He's the chairman of the Human Rights Commission. Professor Odinkalu, good to have you join us this morning. Finally, some of your fears you shared concerning the use of military for this particular election, well, has proven that truly they can do a good job. I recall you issued a couple of statements saying that we need the military especially to be part of keeping watch. They've been on the streets, they've been on the road, and till this very moment, I don't know if your office has received any human rights abuse whatsoever. Is there any report from the from that angle?
I feel proud to call myself a Nigerian this morning. I think our people have done terrific. The story of these elections is about Nigerian people being great, being fantastic, and proving that when our country is challenged, we can rise up and be counted. I remember when I said we need the military and we need to deploy the military and trust the patriotism, the commitment of our men and women in uniform, our officers and men in uniform to do right by our country. I was called names. I had people calling me and telling me how much had been paid into my account that were actually in the red. You know, I feel delighted that the officers and men of the uniformed services of our country have proved that this country is bigger than all of us, and I really feel proud to call myself a Nigerian. The scenes from yesterday were touching across the country. Citizens helping one another, doing right by one another. There were folks who went to vote with mats. They laid mats on the floor. They laid there all day. People brought food to them, brought chairs to them, brought umbrellas for them, provided shelter. Old people were cared for. Nigerian citizens showed that we want to live together. Now, how much prouder can you be? And I like to hope that this morning after, as we go through the processes of counting, collation, announcement of results, people can also feel proud to call ourselves Nigerians and trust that this will come right.
You know, the good thing about this all is what we highlighted earlier on before you came on via Skype is seeing that synergy between the people and even the security agencies. Time was when, by now, reports, loads of them, I'm sure you would have been inundated by reports of abuses.
Well, there were failures. You cannot do a deployment on this scale without some people falling short. That's the reality. But there are rules and there are mechanisms. And the people, you know, our uniformed services, INEC, all our institutions are run by Nigerians. They're not run by Martians. They're not run by people from outer space. And they reflect some of the shortcomings of Nigerians. And I hear people disparage our security agencies, and I have been quite hard on our security agencies because I know they are capable of doing better. And yesterday they showed that they can do better. And yesterday Nigerian citizens showed they can do better. And the question is, are politicians willing to show that they can do as great by our people as our people are willing to do by ourselves? That really is a question that arises from these elections. There have been shortcomings, there have been complaints. We've got some of them. There are some allegations of complaints. Those are going to be looked at. There are also, indeed, in one or two cases, there have been fatalities involving uniformed services. And I draw the line at anybody attacking a man or woman or officer of the uniformed services of Nigeria. For me, once that happens, that's all. Because those people make sacrifices to protect us, and we've got to be grateful for the sacrifices they make. They will make mistakes. And there are rules. That's why court-martials exist. That's why orderly room trials exist. We apply those to them. Just as when judges and magistrates are accused of corruption, there are rules for those. When the only people who get away with breaching our rules in this country are politicians. We float them with impunity and immunity.
Well, you've talked about 4 sides now. You've talked about 3 of those 4 sides you've mentioned doing better. You've talked about the Nigerian people, the security agencies, and you're also asking whether the politicians can do better. But one very critical side is the umpire. From what you saw yesterday, would you say that the umpire did better?
For me, the jury is out on INEC. there were foreseeable glitches that should have been avoided, which occurred yesterday. I think that the most important thing in an election is integrity. And I continue to say I will stand by Professor Jega's integrity. Yesterday, there were shortcomings of foresight, of planning, of professionalism, in my view, and in many ways, of communication. I don't think that INEC should have waited until 4 o'clock to tell the country that we could do manual accreditation, for instance. I think that announcement could have been made earlier because the reports were clear quite early enough that they were difficult. So there were issues of strategic communications. There were issues of planning and foresight. There are those issues that we need to continue to improve upon. And I think we can afford to be a lot more realistic about our planning and management, a lot more rigorous about our planning and management. But I'd hesitate to make a call or a judgment on INEC at the moment, given that it's still got to see this, bring this home. It's got to announce results. It's got to do, before that, it's got to oversee the counting, the collation, and it's got to bring home the will of the Nigerian people safely. Until it does that, I think people should exercise patience.
Well, Professor Odinkalu, we'll come back to you. Just give us a moment. Let's come back to our guest here in the studios. And very quickly, we'll be back to you. And this is absolutely an interesting moment for us as a people and as a nation, knowing full well that almost everyone has been saying the same thing. And he's saying, well, ordinarily, before now, you should have seen his office with so many protest letters or memos saying that this is what has happened. And he said, well, no doubt in a system like this, you definitely would have the weakest link. And have we been able to manage that, Captain Omar?
Talking about the weakest link, we have a security adage that says a chain can only be as strong as its weakest link. Meaning, if there was a threat to that chain, the threat will naturally tend towards the weakest link. Yes, there are weak links. For this first time outing, that shouldn't be an exception. That shouldn't be an exception. And I am expecting that the lessons learned from this first time outing are going to inform what we see going forward. So for now, we can look at it and say, well, we are first time fools. There's a proverb in French that says, the first time fool is not the fool, it's the second time fool that is the fool. You know, what that simply means is, did you learn from the lessons learned? So complaints are going to be coming in, and I tell you, the more complaints I hear, the more comments I get, something just tells me that should be a gap we need to fill. And if we take the mindset to that, we should be able to know that, yes, this is the first time, so we shouldn't expect the picture to be perfect. But by the second, third, there should be an improvement as we go forward. What you want to call a learning curve. At a point in time, you're going to be seeing that we're going to be getting it right all the time.
Actually, Dr. Yusuf attributed to that fact, saying that as we coast along,
yes.
maybe 2019, 2023,
yes,
we're getting better and better.
Yes, better.
Dr. Yusuf, Professor Odinkalu said something about politicians, and I want us to talk more on that, that we have clothed them in the garb of immunity and well, impunity.
You see, the problem with the Nigerian politics is the monetization of politics in this part of the world. Everybody sees politics as the easiest means to grab wealth, which is very sad. Ordinarily, politics should be seen as an avenue to serve society and mankind. But because of the way we have over-practiced presidential system of government, winners taking everything. Everybody now believes that, look, I must be in it.
When you say,
Because,
sorry, you say over-practice.
yes.
Not just practice.
Not just practice.
Why the word
Why?
over?
Well, we move from the parliamentary system of government, we move to democracy, hoping and thinking that to better the lot of this country. If you remember, before January 15, 1966, we were practicing parliamentary democracy. But the 1999 Constitution brought in presidential system of government. And ever since, we have over-practiced. If you are talking about federalism, fiscal federalism, power should devolve. But we are not experiencing that now. I mean, the center seems to be grabbing more power to the extent that everybody wants to get there. But if you know that, look, power should be bottom up, you must know the extent to which you want to acquire this public office for self-aggrandizement. So what I'm saying in effect is that even in America today, can we compare our own presidential system with what we have in America? My answer is no, because we have turned presidential system of democracy upside down in this part of the world. So our politicians have monetized public office, and that is why everybody is in it, and everybody is so desperate to get there. So if the desperation is not removed, if the source or the sources of wealth acquisition is not removed, this desperation will continue to be there, and that will be making allusion to what the chairman of the Human Rights Commission said. Because at the end of the day, who are those making laws for us? The politicians. I told you earlier in the course of this program that the National Assembly is telling us now that whatever law they make should not be subject to the assent of the president. And that is making nonsense, making a mockery of the doctrine of separation of power.
Okay, hold on. Let's bring in Professor Odinkalu, who's still online. Hello, Prof. When you said the electoral system, the process is improving, to what extent or what areas would you say the improvements have been evident?
You just needed to be around and to feel the pulse and the temperature of the country yesterday. But let me just, before doing that, address, if you permit me, the point of my compatriot, the last commentator, who was talking about presidentialism and over practicing it. There is nothing wrong with any system of government that we choose. Presidentialism, parliamentarism, whatever we choose to call it. The problem is not with the system, it's with the operators. And there is no relationship between presidential system of government and money, or the perversion of values that we see in Nigerian politics, or the ethnicization of our politics. I do think we've got to separate out those two. Presidential politics or any form of politics requires underlying belief in our country. And if you look at our politics from the pre-independence elections in 1959, you'll see one thing, that irrespective of the outcome of the vote, Nigerian politicians have preferred consensual politics. In 1960, we had a coalition between NPC and NCNC, later joined by the NNDP, whatever you may think about that. In 1979, which is actually when presidential politics came into politics, the NPN went into a coalition with the MPP at the federal level. When he won in 1999, President Obasanjo brought in the NPP. In 2007, President Yar'Adua tried to bring in the other parties, in addition to the Niger Delta militants, which is the history of the Niger Delta ministry. And I do think that there's a difference between, the one thing that Nigerian politics has shown is that given our diversity, it's important to bring a mindset of power sharing, of bringing all inclusivity, of bringing all Nigerians to the table. And after these results, I hope whoever the winner is at the presidential level, I do hope that they will commit to providing inclusive leadership, because our country needs it, and that is the direction that our politics has taken for over 54 years. Now, what are the areas in which there were improvements yesterday? The attitudes of Nigerians, terrific. In spite of the violence, the frustrations, the drop balls in a lot of cases, Nigerians were committed to the process. There is an idea that democracy has come here to stay. There's a belief that the system should be allowed to work its way through. There's a belief that security services should support democratization and democracy and not impose themselves on it. However you look at it, these are progress. there's also a belief that women should have a greater stake in the politics of our country. And there is a belief that people with disabilities should be dealt with as human beings and not as a drain on our resources. So I feel totally proud, entirely, happily proud this morning to say I am Nigerian, and boy, this country is good.